today the book of Mishlei, Mishlei chapter 9. And in this chapter, King Solomon depicts wisdom as a hostess that's welcoming people to come in. And the idea is that wisdom is always appealing and asking people to join, always asking people to come her way, and always asking people to reconsider their path in life. That is the idea of chapter 9, where King Solomon describes wisdom as this entity that's inviting and telling people why they should join. We'll see later that, on the other hand, you have foolishness and temptation also trying to make her case and ask people to join her camp. And so you have this competing narrative where you have two meals or two hostesses. One is wisdom and one is foolishness and short-sightedness. And each one is sort of trying to sell their case and sell their merchandise. So here we go, chapter 9, verse 1. And remember, it's called the book of Mishlei because it is always an analogy. And it's an analogy to an analogy. There's multiple layers. We'll try and take them all apart. We are here every day between 12 and 12:20. Wisdom built its own home, and it established itself on 7 pillars. Now, this refers to many things, one of which is the creation of the world. The creation of the world was done over 7 days. So, wisdom builds its own home, whereas foolishness and short-sightedness can't build its own home. Wisdom is capable to sustain itself. If you have wisdom, even if you immigrate to another country, even if something catastrophic happens, you always have wisdom. You can always build up. You can always start from scratch. So wisdom, she builds her own house. She builds her house on 7 pillars. And so those 7 pillars can be interpreted as the 7 days of creation, or as something that is incredibly solid. And taking it to another level, the 7, so to speak, forefathers are also, you have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Aaron, and David. Those are also considered to be like 7 forefathers. And so also we are established on those 7 leaders. Verse 2, and it prepares all the food. It prepares all the wine. Today, when you buy a bottle of wine, it comes completely ready. You get the bottle and you just pour it in your cup. Back in the day, it wasn't like that. Back in the day, the wine was extremely dense. It was made just from grapes. There was nothing else in it. And when you got wine, you had to add the exact amount of water that would make it a good drink of wine. And so if you were a host, you really needed to do that with wisdom. You needed to be able to figure out exactly which wine to put in, how much, etc. So when the wisdom makes its meal, it prepares its own food. It prepares its wine with the exact right measurement. It also sets its own table. And again, the idea is that wisdom is something that sustains itself. Wisdom is something, if you have wisdom, you move to another country, you have another world situation, you're always going to be able to survive if you have knowledge, if you have wisdom. And that's exactly what wisdom does. It even sets its own table. Verse 3, wisdom sends out its maids to invite people, because wisdom is never happy with itself. It never stops where it is. If someone actually is passionate about learning about wisdom, they don't just hoard it to themselves. They try and share it with others. There's this inherent desire to share what you learn with others. If there's something that you really cherish in terms of knowledge, you have a passion to share it with others. And so she calls out to everyone this metaphor, this woman called wisdom. So she says, we're in chapter 9, verse 4 in the book of Mishlei of Proverbs. She says, If anyone wants to learn, they should come here. I have wisdom, I want to share it. The idea being, if you have wisdom, you like to share it. And she says, even if someone doesn't have the ability to discern, to say, okay, this is one thing, this is the other, come here, she says, I will tell it to you. And so this woman, who's the metaphor for wisdom, invites people in. Verse Hey, she says, Lechu lachmu belachmi, go and enjoy my bread, ushtu beyein masachti, and drink the wine that I have given. And again, she's appealing and telling people, go take whatever I have to offer and consume it, take it. Ushtu beyain masachti. Again, when you have wisdom, you always want to impart it to others. And then she speaks to those who are walking in the ways of foolishness, those who are walking in the ways of evil, and those who are walking in a way that they don't know better. Izvuk taim v'chyu. She says, if you are following a path of vanity, a path of temptation, izvuk taim, leave it alone, and then you will leave. And this is so true when it comes to the temptations that we see so clearly are destroying someone's life, whether it's opioids or anything that's really ruining someone's life. The person giving them advice says, this is not just a piece of advice. I am telling you this because I want you to live. Often, wisdom is not just an added tip. It's not just, I want to teach another class on this. I want to give another message on this. I want you to join my opinion on something. Often, it has to do with life and death. When you're trying to convince a young kid that they should get themselves a profession, when you try and convince someone to quit smoking, when you try and convince someone to be careful with opioids, whatever it is, those are all things that really are saving someone's life. So she says, listen, leave the ways of temptation and live, and in the path of wisdom, you will really thrive and do well. Now we come to a verse that is so important, and it's just so true. Especially today in today's world where you have social media and you can really interact with anyone. You can speak to anyone, you can converse with anyone, you get into arguments with anyone, whatever it is, there's this interaction between people on a level that didn't exist before. And so the Shlomo HaMelech says such a powerful lesson, really, really incredible. Yoser letz lokeach lo kalon. If you try and reprimand a letz means someone who's really a cynic, someone who is dedicated to a path of negativity or whatever it is. Yoser letz lokeach lo kalon. If you go and you go on and reprimand a letz, someone, I'm trying to think for the best translation for a letz. Letz is really someone who's a real cynic, someone who's always making fun of things, always making fun of good ideas, always making fun of people, sort of a borderline between someone who's a clown and a bully. It's a sort of a concoction of the two of those. So he says, Yoser letz lokeach lo kalon. If you are the one who goes over to a bully, who goes over to someone who's such a cynic, and you try and reprimand them, not only will you not succeed in converting them to your path, but you will bring upon yourself disgrace, because they won't respond nicely. They will respond harshly by turning on you. So instead of pursuing their path of mockery and shaming others and bullying others, they're going to turn on you. So you should know. Now, sometimes, obviously, if someone's bullying another person, you have to speak up. You can't let someone be bullied. But if you see someone who's a letz, who's a cynic and a bully, and they are going on their path of destruction, if you go and attract their attention, you're going to be successful, and then it's going to come all at you and bring you disgrace. So King Solomon says, listen, you want to change someone's way, you want to give someone tochecha, that's great. But if that person is a letz, That would be a terrible idea. And if you go to a rasha, if you go to a wicked person who's not sinning by accident, who's sinning purposefully, and you try and reprimand them, and you try and point out to them their mistake, they will turn on you, and that will bring on you so much more disgrace. So it's interesting, even though in general, Judaism and the Torah encourage us to reprimand someone and to sort of try and bring them to the path of good, remember, if that person is really a letz and a rasha, a bully and a wicked person, then that's just going to bring all of their ire in your direction. Do not reprimand a letz, a clown, someone who's a cynic and a bully. Do not reprimand them, penny snacka, because they will hate you. There's no point in reprimanding them, getting into arguments with them, and trying to convert them to your ways. However, if you get into a constructive discussion with a wise person, they will love you. So if you, for example, you see two people smoking, let's say just as an example. One of them is a cynic, a bully, etc. You tell him, don't smoke, it can kill you. That's just going to come right back at you. That person is going to come at you. But if it's someone who's smart, if it's someone who's gentle, if it's someone who's sensitive, if it's someone who's wise, that person is going to love you and say, thank you. You really helped me by pointing this out. That's the difference between the letz and a chacham. Not only that, if you reprimand a chacham, if you explain to a chacham, a wise person, what it is that they are doing well, that they should be correcting, they will love you. They will thank you for the rest of their life. So it's always important. Save your ammo. If there is something you can point out that someone's doing wrong, give that feedback to someone who's smart, to someone who's thoughtful, to someone who's kind, and they will thank you. If you give it to someone who's a rasha, to someone who's wicked, to someone who is always trying to harm others, then they will put that right back at you. And that's obviously not a good thing. Do not reprimand a wicked person because they will hate you. Speak to the wise person and he will love you. Give the wise person wisdom and he will even become smarter. If you teach a smart student, that student is going to take that wisdom and go even farther with it. Imagine the teacher that taught Einstein. He taught him that much and then it became so much greater. Interestingly, Einstein had trouble in school, but eventually there was someone who did teach him. And that person who taught Einstein obviously had that knowledge multiplied. So, give the wise person wisdom, and they will become even smarter. Give the righteous one a good idea, a good tip, and they will take it even farther. If you teach someone who's looking for insight, then they will add so much wisdom to it. If you want wisdom, the first essence of wisdom is Yirat Hashem, the fear of God, the desire to do good. Because if you give wisdom to someone who has no desire to do good, then that's not going to get that far. But if you give wisdom to someone who is actually looking to do good, then that will go far. Chilat Chochma Yirat Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God, the desire to do the will of God, and only then can the wisdom be constructive and helpful. If you want to actually be incredibly spiritual, if you want to be very close to God, then also you have to have insight. It's a two-way road. On the one hand, you need to have fear of God to acquire wisdom. On the other hand, you need to have some kind of wisdom, of insight, if you want to pursue the knowledge of God. Now we come to a pasuk that's very, 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 very famous. It is said in multiple prayers and occasions. It is speaking about the Torah. Because through me will your days multiply, and it will add you years of life. When we talk about life, there's both quantity and there's quality. There's the amount of days and years that we live, and there is the what we accomplish in those days. And so God says, "Kidir bu yamecha." If you do my will, you'll get both. You'll have meaningful days, and you'll have more long days. Now, often in life, we think, we think that if something was done to us that's wrong, it's going to go on someone else. So, people blame this person, that person, but the bottom line is who gets the consequences, who has to live with our decisions. At the end of the day, King Solomon says in verse 12, Im chachamta chachamta lach. If you do something wise, at the end of the day, it's your decision and it's going to stick. And if you clown around, if you're making a mockery, if you're ridiculing, that's also only going to remain on you. Im chachamta chachamta. If you do with wisdom, you'll get all the reward for that. If you do something with mockery, levadcha tisa, then it will be with you and only with you. And now that we've concluded this part, goes to compare. Remember, we spoke about the wise woman inviting everyone to the meal she made herself and prepared the bread, the wine, and how she calls out to everyone and wants to share that wisdom for everyone. Now, by contrast, we have the metaphor of the seductive woman representing foolishness and going on the negative part, on the negative path. So here we go. Here's the metaphor. Verse 13. The representative of foolishness is always talking, is always rambunctious, speaking, not necessarily knowing about what. She too sits at the entrance of her house and is trying to call people in to her. She wants to often call people, and she'll go to people who want to be objective, who want to hear both sides, and she'll say, "Come, you heard the side of wisdom. Come hear my side too." And obviously that doesn't work, because while it's important to hear always different sides, when it comes to a side that's negative, that's evil, that's filled with foolishness, then not all narratives are equal. She calls people bypassers who sort of just want to choose their own way, who want to hear different sides. And she says, the ones that she really appeals to are the ones who are innocent and not necessarily sensitive. You think about all the disinformation campaigns that try and get people to believe things that are not true. And that's really who they appeal to. They appeal to the people, when they make a phone call, a spam call, and they say, okay, give us your credit card number. They're not aiming for the smart person. They're aiming for the person who's going to give them all that information. The innocent should come here, but not in a good way innocent. And now she tries to convince him. How does she try and convince him? The wise woman tried and convince him and said, look, I have a big feast and everyone is joining. But the foolishness does not really have what to offer. There's no bread, there's no wine, there's nothing that it was able to prepare. And so what's the selling point? What's the idea of asking people to come? Very famous pasuk. She says to him, sweet, stolen water are the best ones. Foolishness tries to bring people in with temptation, with the experience, with experiencing treading in forbidden territory. She says stolen water tastes the best. And the bread that you eat in hiding, that is the most delicious one. So often temptation tries to suck people in by saying, oh, look, it's a forbidden experience, and then people go in. And the person doesn't know that once you get sucked in, there are ghosts there. It's in the depths of abyss of destruction. That is where the people who go on that path that brings us to the conclusion of Perek Yud. We're here every single day, Sunday through Thursday, which means we'll begin again next Sunday through Thursday from 12 to 12:20. Thank you so much for joining. May you be blessed with a happy and good Shabbat, only goodness for you and your family. Leitaraot and Shabbat Shalom. Everyone to our daily learning. We are learning today the book